of choice. I don't. Mine is somewhere to be found, but tell us a little bit about this beverage. What is it that you're having? And how does it make you feel?
Oh, I've got so many beverages actually. I'm going to be very hydrated by the end of this chat. So I've got a strawberry banana chlorophyll, the chlorella smoothie omelet in this hamburger mug. I've got black tea with a little bit of milk. And then as a final palate cleanser, I've got a glass of water.
I have my water here. It's a taller glass. And then my drink of electrolytes, it's somewhere. So maybe after this, I'll be just as hydrated as you. Fingers crossed.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. So today I know you're going to join me to talk about relationships, navigating them in the different aspects. But before we jump right into that, Nadia, introduce yourself, tell my audience a little bit about who you are, and of course, why are you helping everyone find love in all the right places?
Absolutely. So my name is Nadia. I am a licensed psychotherapist and a coach, and I also I help women who have a history of toxic relationships, and I use a combination of spiritual tools like tarot to help them learn more about their past connections, so that way we can start to chart a course for a happier future. And the reason I got into this work was because one of the things I found working as a therapist was that, like, when you work in mental health, your goal is to help your clients learn new things, to introspect, to heal, to move forward. But I found that when people went through a breakup, is actually a really special time because that is when we are the most motivated to change. That's when we are the most motivated to try new things. That post breakup glow, we realize like we got to get our shit together, we got to change. It makes us realize things about ourselves. And the people that we spend time with are also mirrors to ourselves. And, you know, even when we're, healthy and doing good, it's not always easy to have a perspective on what we're doing in our lives, right? And like what's the effect of what we're doing and how we're thinking about things. But we've all gotten out of a relationship and looked back and been like, what was I doing? And really getting out of a relationship, especially a really difficult one, is a time where we're really forced to confront those things. And it can be incredibly painful, but there's a really special opportunity in that time if you do it the right way, for so much personal growth and transformation and introspection, and really it can become a really, really beautiful thing. So that's how I got into working, specifically coming out of toxic relationships, and being ready for relationships and knowing that you have that history.
So let me ask you a question because this is something that seems to be hotly debated, especially in the online space. Sometimes what I would do as a coach myself, who helps men and women, but mostly women in this older women, sorry, in this situation, is that we all have our own interpretation of things when it comes to relationship, right? So,
Mhm.
quick question for you. What is a toxic relationship to you? And what are maybe some of the behaviors that are attributed with a toxic relationship?
Well, this can mean so many different things for different people, but one of the things I find, like, the real core hallmark of a toxic relationship is that it's not about being together and growing together. And, I think about it as sort of two people as, whole individuals who want to come together and grow something together. I find the real hallmark of a toxic relationship is when there is an expectation for the other person to give something to you, to give you completion or to provide a need for you. Because a lot of times that is really creates the basis for, we see what I see happening a lot is we've all known somebody, they got into a relationship and it started off really hot and heavy and they were totally in love and it was just like they were totally seemed perfect for each other. Well, actually, what I find is really happening is that they know how to do the same dance, right? They have the same belief patterns, the same roles, and the same expectations around relationships. And so there becomes this expectation that this person is going to fill a need for me. They're going to give me esteem. They're going to do something for me so I can feel better in myself. And then, but obviously, because we're actually two individuals who have different needs and viewpoints and perspectives and paths, even when we're coupled, nobody's going to be able to provide that for you all the time. And that's when you start to see tensions start to rise, tempers flare because like, hey, wait a sec, in the beginning, when things were more surface level, you knew how to really attend to my needs. And then now that we're getting deeper, you know, I'm not able to, you're not giving me what I need. And so then that can start to create fights and, that can start to create more flare ups and disagreements and disconnects because the basis of the relationship really wasn't there. It just felt like it was because, just because you know how to dance with somebody doesn't mean that you really, know them deeply. And I think that's one of the core things about a toxic relationship. And it's really hard because it's not, when we enter into a relationship, nobody gets into a relationship thinking like, oh, I'm just gonna, totally ruin this, or, I'm just gonna be my worst self and see what happens. Well, believe it or not, most people don't do that. I'm sure some people do, but contrary to what it might seem like, most people aren't actually doing that. But what happens is that we have these beliefs that we're bringing into it, and the way that that changes our interpretation of things and the way that we operate. And so what we think is actually, maybe that was something that we were taught that worked for us for a while, or it was something that was given to us as a certain expectation, and we're trying to exercise that, and that doesn't work for our partner. And so there's no real communication. And then it's like we both end up living our own, what's the word I'm looking for? Like we both end up, sort of living out our own patterns and our own cycles through the relationship, but we're not actually in it together. And that's really what can turn what started off as a seemed like a happy relationship into something very toxic and difficult to get out of.
I remember someone saying that a toxic relationship, because your point is something that I 100% agree on, and that's what I would view it as its behaviors that define it. And to your point, sometimes we don't know we're going to be the person that's causing the relationship to be toxic, right? Right.
Yeah.
But I know there's
Yeah.
some people who would say that, or there's some people who would define it, or who would say that, well, a toxic relationship is this person is not giving me what I want, but I'm not going to communicate it at all. They got to read my mind, and I'm just going to sit here closed off and say, okay, I'm not getting this, I'm not getting that. And I wonder sometimes, and when I touched on this earlier, I saw you nodding your head. Is it that we are struggling to interpret the situation for what it is, or do we already come in with our predetermined thoughts and say, okay, if Nadia does this, it automatically means this without the communication piece?
But I mean, it's a mixture of both. So what I find is that a lot of people, especially women, the way that look, there's no like, this is how you should do a relationship or this is not. I mean, granted, there are some ways you really shouldn't be doing a relationship, but for the most part, whatever works for the couple is what you want in a relationship is going to be very different than maybe what I want in a relationship. And like, you know, it just depends on, it really matters what the people in the relationship want. But what happens is a lot of times we get very used to sort of learning how to be a mirror to somebody else or saying, oh, okay, well, give this person, I should be this way for this person. A lot of women will come in and say, like, oh, I should be like, I really need to be a good girlfriend. Like, I need to always be very loving and I need to always be very attentive. And I need to really, always make sure that I'm there and I don't cause any problems and I don't cause any drama. And on the surface, there is nothing wrong with that. Like that actually sounds like a great ideal for what we should be looking for in a relationship, right? Like the opposite. I'm gonna be, distant and I'm not gonna listen and I'm gonna, not care about him or attend to his needs. Like, no, obviously that's not what we want to do. But what happens is that instead we think it can sometimes what we don't realize though is the underlying belief is that this is the way I'm supposed to act in a relationship. And so therefore, if I'm doing my part, then he should do his part, which is then giving me love and attention and affection. And but what happens is that we're not actually communicating what that is because we're so used to just saying, oh, well, if I, I'm doing my part and like my part is to be this person for my partner. But then when it comes to what we actually want, we don't know. And so we can't communicate that. And then that can create, or sometimes what I also find happening a lot of times is we'll put ourselves into a situation where we're overextending ourselves or we're giving too much and feeling like, he should, love what I'm doing for him when he didn't really even ask for that. And so it feels like, oh, my labor is not wanted or he doesn't care about me. And it's really none of those things. And so it may feel like actually she's being shut out or he's not being attentive to her needs. But sometimes we're so disconnected from our own needs, we don't know how to communicate with them. We don't know how to communicate what they are, but we're operating off of the belief system that, relationships should be this way. And so maybe I think that, maybe my belief system is I should always be a good girlfriend. I should always be super attentive and, always cook for my boyfriend and be there for him and like fulfill this really traditional role. But I might not know that my boyfriend actually has a much different approach. Have you ever heard of like the concept of love languages? That kind of touches on the same thing, right? That maybe for him, he doesn't really care about me cooking for him. He doesn't really care about me, always asking him how he's doing and stuff like that. Maybe he is really, you know, maybe just having a sexual relationship is how he sees feels connected to me, but that's not what it feels like to me. And so that really kind of creates a disconnect where we assume, and especially if you get into a relationship where it seems like we're both on the same page and everything feels very connected and we're all on the same page in the very beginning, that in time when it doesn't work that way, we haven't set the stage for communicating about it. And so then everything breaks down and then it feels like one person is shutting out the other when really we're just operating on two different paradigms. And it doesn't mean that one person is wrong or the other person is right. It's just, we're not meshing together. And that causes a lot of issues.
Why do you think women struggle with that in their relationships?
I was thinking about this a lot today. I think that women are, things are changing a lot in society. I think that women, there's a lot big, there's a lot of emphasis on being independent. There's a lot of emphasis on, taking care of yourself and, trying to be strong and independent and, having a great career and all of those things. But I also think that a lot of women, we still hold on to this idea that, that's what we do in our life. But then when it comes to our relationships, our parents had a very different approach to way relationships were, you know, especially I think we were talking about this last time, like our parents' generation, we didn't talk about therapy, we didn't talk about mental health. And so we don't have, so what we want is that we want a partner who's going to communicate with us. We want a partner who's going to be an equal and going to be on the same page as us. But we haven't had that role model. So we have this model in the world of, how to be a successful woman who has all of these things, but we don't have any of this, but we don't have that, we don't have anything to go off of when it comes to how to chart this new way of doing things in a relationship. We're still looking at the old way. And so what I find ends up happening is that we are trying to apply an old paradigm to doing things in a new way. And then it's like, I kind of was thinking about it today, and I was like, it's almost like trying to decorate a house, but not knowing that you're colorblind and then not understanding why your designs don't make any sense. Because the lens that you're looking through is you don't know that you're looking through a different lens than somebody else. And so I find this happens a lot where I'll meet women who are amazing, incredible women, but then the men that they're dating is just, totally, not a fit and, be quite a destructive relationship in some ways. Because I had this one client, I'll never forget her. And she was, I mean, smart, beautiful, strong, independent, but her family system was very chaotic. Her mom was very, dated like very brutal, harsh men who were verbally abusive. And her mom always just kind of was like, all right, well, like, let's just, try to be quiet and try to, make sure that everything is okay. Let's walk on eggshells. And so she was placed under a lot of pressure to be a high performer. But when it came to relationships, she was operating off this paradigm of like, oh, well, like it's my role to kind of keep the household quiet and to like, not ruffle any feathers, to, not make any, to not upset anybody. And so what ends up happening is when that's what you're putting up, then you end up attracting people who are comfortable with that kind of thing. And and I've also seen, we'll say like, oh, like my family and my friends introduced me to these really nice guys, and it just doesn't click with me. Well, it's because he's not operating off of the same paradigm. And so it becomes almost more comfortable to be with somebody who is actually very toxic because that's what they understand. And so I think that we're really at a point where we're we kind of know what we don't want, but we're not really sure how to go forward with what it is that we do. And I think that we as a society are changing, really changing that. And I think that well, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but I would say that's basically just of this. You know, we're operating off of an old paradigm and we're realizing that it's getting stale, but we're not really sure what to do next. I think that's